So the St. Mary's has been a very active group. They've been involved in doing these assessments, so they've helped DFO with the juvenile assessments, electrofishing. They've helped them with the smolt wheel, and when we used to have an adult assessment, they used to help with that. They've done their own research here. They've assisted in research being done by academic institutions to help learn more about the river. And they're involved in a lot of conservation in terms of restoration, advocacy, public education and awareness. There's so many different programs that they've been involved in, so they're just an excellent example of what a conservation group can do.
Kelt are salmon that have spawned in the previous fall and are now migrating back out to salt water in the spring. By implanting transmitters in salmon as they're on their way back out to sea, we can understand how, for instance, they respond to different oceanographic conditions or what types of animals are preying on them. That helps us solve the big mystery of why so many Atlantic salmon are dying at sea.
Very exciting stuff, it really is, because it's a lot of information that we don't have currently. So we kind of know where they're at, what they're doing in the river, but we just don't know what they're doing at sea. So for us here at St. Mary's to be a part of that, it's really neat. The DFO team came down and set up with us, and we had, I think, 20 anglers on a license, a special license to angle for the Kelts, which are salmon that are on their way out to sea. I think our license was for about a month, but in 7 days we ended up catching about 40 salmon, and some multi-sea run salmon, some really big ones in there. And that shows that the system is super healthy and that the fish are in there.
So these fish tanks were brought by DFO, and they hold Atlantic salmon Kelts that were caught and released into the tanks from the St. Mary's River. These fish on the St. Mary's River seem extremely healthy to me. Immediately when they're hooked, they take you right into your backing. They make large runs, they jump, they cartwheel, just like a fresh fish might. But they are very bright and in great condition.
A whole variety of human activities have degraded the freshwater habitat that Atlantic salmon need. So basically that means that rivers are wide and shallow where they should be narrow and deep. And by actually getting in there, bringing an excavator in and reshaping the river itself, we can recreate that important spawning and rearing habitat for Atlantic salmon. And that's work that immediately pays off with massive increases in the number of salmon spawning and more salmon parr and smolt going out to sea.
When we got here in 2014 and measured it, it was 1 meter deep and it was 6 meters long. So the pool was basically gone. So if you imagine you got 120 feet wide in this particular section of river, it was all about 10 centimeters deep. So shallow, warm, 30 degrees Celsius water, no holding water pool, no real good holding for the fact that you got a major spawning tributary over there. So when the fish were coming up, they had nowhere to hold before they went into spawn.
It had been stuck in this over-widened state for like 40 years. So even going back and talking to some of the older people that lived on the river, their conception of the river was still very much a degraded one. And we found that we kind of had to go back even further in time to get an idea of what this river looked like when the returns were at its peak.
What we're finding, and it's similar to other projects that we have done on the Gulf side, is that when you first put in these type of structures, you will get, at the start, a lot of your spawning, maybe 80% of it is going to be above these rock sills. And then over time, what you find is that as the pools develop and the riffles below them, where all your production, your bugs and all that stuff happens, then they become part of your spawning habitat, which is in your classic salmon literature, your pool riffle sequences. Your riffles are for spawning, but we find that By the end of 5 years, about 50% of your spawning is still above the sills, and about 50% is then in your riffle areas, and that's pretty consistent up and down the whole river. The surprise is that as we restored 1 kilometer or 2 every year, every one of those sills had salmon spawning behind it. So it kind of begs the question is, well, if there's no fish in the river, where are all these fish coming from that are digging reds behind these sills?
The St. Mary's River once supported a vibrant recreational fishery for wild Atlantic salmon, and because of lower returns many years ago, that was closed. However, this is a clear example of dedicated conservation work paying off. People on this river will tell you that they're seeing more and more wild Atlantic salmon coming back to the river each year. And that has many people asking, should we be reopening a catch and release fishery for salmon on this river?
A lot of people that have been here for years and years have said, we're seeing it come back. We're seeing fish jumping in the estuary. We're seeing brook trout where we hadn't seen brook trout before. We're seeing spawning, we're seeing reds where we had never seen them before. And so just the little bit that I've seen in 6 years, but these people have been around for decades and they're seeing extreme changes.
I'm very optimistic about the species and the recovery, and I think on the rivers like the St. Mary's, where we're doing all sorts of different enhancement work and in-stream restoration, I'm very hopeful that we're going to see recreational angling back on the river before too long.
Seems to be like we have a lot of fish coming back to this river, which is what the goal was. Give them a chance, right?
What do we have in the river? Like juvenile densities versus adult salmon. We need to know these numbers so that one day, hopefully in the near future, we can open up some sort of a recreational fishery with everybody, all parties involved in a dialogue where we can come up with a management style that's not antiquated from the past. And perhaps the St. Mary's could be that river where we're the model for the future.